Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Zoroaster and the Worship of Fire by Manly P. Hall, an article taken from The All-Seeing Eye, Volume 4, Number 6, October 1927. Zoroaster and the Worship of Fire by Manly P. Hall. The prophet of the Parsees is Zarathustra, more commonly known as Zoroaster, concerning whose life practically nothing is known to the modern member of that faith. It is generally believed that Zoroaster lived between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, and the religion founded by him exercised a most profound influence over the people of Persia up to the time of the Greek conquest of that country. It then began to wane, but in the first centuries of Christianity, it was re-established and continued a power in the religious world for nearly 500 years. From that time on, the number of its followers steadily decreased. Until today, it is listed with the minor cults. In various parts of India, there are still a number of Parsees, many of them occupying positions of dignity and power. They are particularly numerous in and about Bombay. The Mohammedans destroyed most of their early sacred books, and the faith of Islam has to a great extent superseded the Persian cult even in the land of its own genesis. The original Zoroastrian doctrines were somewhat modified during the first centuries of the Christian era, and a simplified form of the faith under the name of the Mithraic Mysteries secured a very strong foothold in the then all-powerful Roman Empire. The Mithraic doctrines became extremely popular with the Roman soldiery, great numbers of whom were converted to its principles. The Roman soldiers carried the Mithraic faith with them in their wars of conquest, and as a result, a great part of Europe accepted the teachings expounded by the Mithraic priests. Even today, remnants of Mithraic carvings may be found in England, France, Germany, and Italy. While the mysteries of Mithras did not contain the full philosophy of the Zoroastrians, its power lay in its simplicity. The initiation rituals were given in the catacombs and subterranean chapels under the city of Rome, which in a few years came to serve as the first meeting places of the persecuted Christians. So influential did the rite of Mithras become that at least one emperor of Rome was initiated into it. It is impossible in the 20th century AD to form any adequate comprehension of the original Zoroastrian belief. It is not even possible to describe the founder of that cult. There is one picture supposedly of Zoroaster, a copy of which is reproduced herewith. The original is a rock carving, the face mutilated beyond recognition. Although this is generally accepted as a likeness of the Magus, there is a reasonable doubt as to its authenticity, and those best equipped to pass an opinion on the subject hazard the guess that the sculpturing was intended as a representation of Ahura Mazda, the Persian principle of good. The face may have been destroyed either by a zealous Zoroastrian, for the members of this faith are strongly opposed to idolatry, or it may have been mutilated by the Mohammedans. Most accounts agree that Zoroaster was born of an immaculate conception. His father, in performing his religious ceremonial, drank the sacred Homa juice, which is the same as the Sonya of the Hindus. As a result, his wife conceived a child. The occurrence was accompanied by supernatural manifestations and other strong experiences. The king of the country, becoming alarmed lest the celestially conceived child should ultimately usurp his throne, made several efforts to kill the infant, but these were frustrated by the intercession of divine being. According to some accounts, the father of Zoroaster was in reality a supernatural being, a great fire spirit. Those affirming this theory regard the sacred Zoroastrian fire as a symbol of the father of the Magus. The king's jealousy and the attempts of that monarch to destroy the infant prophet parallel the account of the nativities of both Jesus and Krishna. Like Jesus, Zoroaster began his public ministry at his 30th year. He first converted the king to his faith. The courtiers naturally followed their monarch, and in a comparatively short time, the entire nation had accepted the creed. One of the legends concerning the life of Zoroaster asserts that he spent 20 years in fasting and meditation in the Persian deserts. Practically his only food during that time being a certain sacred cheese which never grew old or moldy. At one time he is supposed to have lived upon a sacred mountain which was surrounded always by a ring of flames. Through these flames, the prophet could pass without danger of being burned, but if others attempted to follow him, they were immediately consumed. The sacred scriptures of the Parsees mention 3 sons and 3 daughters of Zoroaster, but whether these were actually historical personages or merely allegorical figures cannot be ascertained. The manner of the prophet's death is also a great mystery. According to one account, he was killed by a weapon hurled at him while at prayer by an envious and wicked noble. This allegory further relates that before dying, the mortally wounded Magus threw his rosary at the noble, who was killed by the string of beads as though they had been a bolt from heaven. The most popular story concerning the death of Zoroaster is to the effect that he was destroyed by a bolt of lightning descending from the constellation of Orion. Some believe the sheet of flame which descended and consumed him was the fiery body of his father, who, gathering up the mortal remains of his illustrious son, bore them into the heavens. The Zoroastrian theology is dualism in monotheism. It was established to combat the prevailing pantheism which Zoroaster believed was endangering the spiritual well-being of his people. Zoroaster taught that the one supreme nature was divisible into 2 parts. The first of these parts was the spirit of good, popularly termed Ahura Mazda. The second was the spirit of evil, designated Ahriman. In the beginning, both Ahriman and Ahura Mazda were radiant spiritual beings, partaking equally of the effulgency of their common father, the one eternal light. But Ahriman, being possessed of pride and jealousy, rebelled against his brother and, hurling himself downward from the mouth of light, created for himself a great darkness in which he dwelt with his angels, who became the spirits of darkness. In the darkness which he had created, the perverse spirit, or adversary, brooded moodily for many ages. Here he set up his kingdom of dark spirits. In the meantime, Ahura Mazda, who had remained true and beautiful, and was consequently a glorious light being, proceeded to establish a beautiful universe according to the will of the infinite Creator. As soon as the light appeared in the sphere of darkness, Ahriman and his legions attacked it, attempting to thwart the plan of divine progress. Ahriman realized that ultimately the light of Ahura Mazda would destroy all the darkness he had created, and then the perverted genius, being unable to dwell in the light, would be compelled to submit himself to the radiant will of his brother. Whenever Ahura Mazda created a beautiful sphere or a perfect creature, Ahriman incorporated into the creation the spirit of negation and perverseness. For every good thing which Ahura Mazda did, Ahriman fashioned an evil shadow. So an eternal warfare existed between the light and the darkness. As long as shadow existed, Ahriman could remain a rebellious spirit, but when the last shadow was dispersed by the light, then Ahriman must admit himself defeated and acknowledge the light to be stronger than the darkness. There is no doubt that the Persian concept of the anthropomorphic deity was accepted by the early Christians and incorporated by them into their faith, for the devil of Christianity is the perverse spirit of the Persian Ahriman. Ahriman is that something of darkness, which resides in the nature of everything, and which led the disciple to declare that when he would do good, evil was ever near him. The theory of God and the devil contending for the soul of man is nowhere more clearly brought out than in the ancient Persian mysteries. Yet though the war waged, it was always evident that Ahura Mazda would finally conquer, for he was armed with the power and glory of the one deity, by whose orders he was establishing creation. Thus, when Ahura Mazda created man, Ahriman also entered into the composite constitution of man, contributing his lower and irrational self. He who sins, therefore, increases the shadow and thereby lengthens the existence of Ahriman, while he who does virtuous acts radiates light and truth and hastens the day when Ahura Mazda will redeem the entire world from darkness. In the Mithraic form of Zoroastrianism, a third element is introduced which serves as the mediator between Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. This mediator is Mithras, the Persian Christ, who was brought into being to hasten the reconciliation of the light and the darkness. Mithras, likewise, is born of an immaculate conception, and even as Jesus, his place of birth was a grotto or stable. The Christian God-man, the Christ, is a composite of Mithras, Orpheus, and Serapis. From Mithras comes the concept of the resurrected Lord, who after 3 days in the tomb rolls away the stone and redeems his world. From the sad-faced Serapis with his long hair and curls upon his shoulders, the Christians borrowed their man of sorrows, and from the radiant Orpheus their concept of the Son of God. Mithras, the Mediator, became the most powerful deity of the Zoroastrian faith. Unlike the strict monotheism of the first followers of Zoroaster, the devotees of Mithras made many and varied reproductions of their deity and also of Kronos, the lion-headed god of time. Mithras evidently signifies the human mind, Ahura Mazda, the human spirit, and Ahriman, the human body. The light of the mind dispels the darkness of ignorance, and mankind, thus illumined, recognizes and adores its divine creator. The Zoroastrians are generally termed fire worshippers, for under this symbol they revere the deity. Fire is the origin of light and heat. It is a cleansing element. It is an element eternally alive and eternally active, therefore naturally appropriate as a symbol of that divine fire which burns within the heart and soul of every creature. The ancient Parsees had many peculiar beliefs concerning the sanctity of the elements. For example, earth was sacred. To bury a dead thing in it was to pollute the earth. Water was sacred, and to stop its flow was a grievous sin. Air was sacred and should not be polluted with evil odors. Fire was sacred, and nothing which was unclean should be burned, lest the first itself become polluted. It was a most grievous sin to pollute any of the elements. These beliefs rather complicated the problem of sanitation, especially in connection with the last offices to the dead. To care for this situation, the towers of silence were erected. These towers are very highly revered, and it's most difficult to secure even a photograph of them. None but the proper representatives of the faith are permitted to enter them. For the sake of tourists, however, there is a model of the Tower of Silence a short distance from the actual tower in Bombay. These towers are the Parsee repositories of the dead and are usually circular in shape and not very high, varying from 10 to 20 feet in height. In these towers, the dead bodies are laid, and the ever-present buzzards and vultures speedily dispose of the remains. Thus, the elements are not polluted, and death itself is made to serve the purposes of life. There is a curious myth concerning the Zoroastrian fires, to the effect that many of them burn for centuries without ever going out. The oldest of the Zoroastrian fires has burned continuously for over 3,000 years, and from it have been lighted fires unnumbered. There is a tradition to the effect that at the present time this ancient fire is in America. But we have been unable to discover any tangible evidence in support of this belief. The religion of the Persians has produced a profound effect upon its followers, who are noted for their honesty, integrity, devotion, and sincerity. There is practically no crime among them, and they live together in friendliness and understanding. They preserve with great care the doctrines of their people and are models that might well be imitated in matters pertaining to religious tolerance. They are sympathetic with the Christians and will gladly work hand in hand with the members of any faith, as long as those members are honest and sincere. In India, the Parsees are noted contributors to charities and public institutions. They have succeeded greatly in various commercial pursuits, especially banking and brokerage lines. They are most generous with their possessions, considering it a sin to refuse aid to the needy, and their kindliness and gentleness are recognized wherever they have established themselves. They are never aggressive and will only defend their own rights, never assailing the rights of others. They are interested in educational institutions and evidence a high degree of culture. The Parsee is an excellent demonstration of the fact that the religious codes of ancient times were both noble and exalted. The faith of the Parsee is very old, but the attitude which that faith creates in its followers is one much needed by the modern world. Men in great place are thrice servants, servants to the sovereign or state, servants of fame and servants of business, so as they have no freedom, neither in their person, nor in their actions, nor in their times. Bacon. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.